This is a tale about the heart of the segregated South and seven young men entangled in crime, punishment, and racial injustice that echoes through the annals of American history. So join us as we talk about the tragic story of the Martinsville Seven. And if you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. Also, if you like to support the channel, you can do so on my Buy Me Coffee Patreon page in the description below. But without further ado, let's get started. In the twilight evening of January 8th, 1945, Ruby Stroud Floyd, a 32-year-old white woman, ventured into a predominantly black neighborhood in Martinsville, Virginia. She was known to the area, having distributed clothing and religious materials as a Jehovah's Witness. Despite warnings from residents about the dangers of lingering in the area too long, Floyd pressed on, and this was a decision that would set in motion a series of events that would end very tragically. As night fell on this chilling January evening, Floyd was marked by the brutal signs of assault. She sought refuge at the home of a woman named Mary Wade. The exact details of what happened to Ruby are shrouded in uncertainty, but she would make the shocking claim that she was raped by 13 black men. In an instant, the police were galvanized in action, sweeping up suspects in a wave of frantic arrests. By the next morning, 7 young black men sat in custody, having signed confessions that not only implicated themselves, but each other. This story carries a deeper level of complexity. Only one of those arrested had a previous criminal record, and the rest were employed and seemingly led very respectable lives. Their confessions were stained by dubious circumstances, the air thick with the whispers that these confessions were extracted under the influence of alcohol and without legal counsel. To preempt the public's wrath, the authorities spread the men across different jails, amplifying the community's tensions. As the trials commenced, Martinsville held its breath. Each man faced a trial that was more than a foregone conclusion than a quest for justice. Under the imitating gaze of an all-white, all-male jury, their stories were unique and heartbreaking, attempted claw through the iron of racial bias. They argued that the confessions had been manipulated, written by heavy-handed officers, their own words twisted and contorted into scripts that they no longer recognized. Beyond the courtroom, though, the storm of gossip swirled. The white community's disdain for Ruby Floyd's missionary work as a Jehovah's Witness and her brazen visits to the black part of Martinsville only added fuel to this fire. Some whispered that Ruby was having an illicit affair with one of the accused, a theory that was never addressed during the trials. This is because Judge Kenan Whittle's words rang out with chilling deliberateness. This case must be tried in such a way as not to disturb the kindly feelings locally existing between the races. It must be tried as though both parties are members of the same race. His proclamation was a smokescreen, a coded message to uphold Virginia's grim history of racial sentencing disparities under the guise of maintaining community stability. As the nation watched, dread and morbid curiosity, the trials hurled forward at an unsettling speed. The community's clamor for swift retribution echoed loudly within the courtroom's walls. Judge Whittle presiding over these trials with a grave demeanor, ensuring that the proceedings were expedited. All of the trials for each defendant were concluded within a day, cementing the fate of the 7 men. The evidence presented was troubling. The confessions were coerced. The testimonies seemed manipulated, but each session ended with juries deliberating for no more than 2 hours, and the verdicts handed down with a swiftness that felt almost merciless and premeditated, sentencing each of the accused to death by electrocution. See, in the early days of the 20th century, the state of Virginia was engulfed in the shadows where justice took a cruelly distorted form, especially when it came to black men accused of raping white women. Since the electric chair debuted in Virginia in 1908, it has surged with deadly currents primarily against black men, 45 in total, all convicted of raping white women. In fact, Virginia had become notorious for this, surpassed by only Texas, North Carolina, Georgia. The case would soon garner national and international attention, drawing the fierce gaze of civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the CRC. These groups, led by determined lawyers like Martin A. Martin, threw the weight behind the Martinsville Seven, striving for justice. But this courtroom wasn't a place for easy victories. The NAACP meticulously prepared for the appellate mountain that they had to climb. They highlighted the racial prejudice evident in the venue, the immense pressure that the juries faced, the harrowing history of capital punishment leveled disproportionately against black men, and it seemed, in Virginia, justice only wore a cloak of hypocrisy. A poignant plea stood out in an editorial of the New York Amsterdam News. It read, "When we consider the fact that the entire history of the Old Dominion state, no white man has ever received capital punishment for rape, then necessitate that we must conclude that the death penalty for 7 men for a singular crime was neither righteous nor compassionate nor wise." Despite these powerful arguments raised, the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals upheld the death sentences. Their response, spearheaded by Chief Justice Edward W. Hudgens, dripped with disdain, stating that one can hardly conceive of a more atrocious, more beastly crime. While the custodians of justice remained unyielding, time was running out. Both the NAACP and the CRC knew that they had to escalate their efforts, so they turned towards the governor, John S. Battle, conveying the disparity in sentencing. But Battle, firm in his stance, declared that prisoners have not been convicted because they are Negroes and should not be released because they are Negroes. His decision seemed immovable. Just as the battle for justice raged domestically, a storm of international voices thundered in. Letters flooded from all corners of the globe and impassioned telegrams. The world was watching, and Governor Battle felt suffocated by the global scrutiny. Meanwhile, the CRC set about a demonstration with 400 souls marching towards Richmond, January 30th, 1951. They stood beneath the stern gaze of the Capitol Guards and state militia. Even with their united pleas, they couldn't sway Battle. He seemed to listen, but remained resolute. So on a cold morning, sunlight struggled to pierce through the somber clouds of Virginia State Prison. The first 4 men marched to the electric chair, February 2nd, their steps heavy with dread. 3 days later, the remaining 3 joined them in their tragic procession. The youngest of the 7, with a heavy heart, yet spirited, spoke his final words before his execution. "God knows I didn't touch that woman, and I'll see y'all on the other side." This became the largest execution for rape in United States history. The case of the Martinsville Seven was not merely about death. It echoed a somber lesson of justice skewed by prejudice. In 1977, the United States Supreme Court in Coker v. Virginia decreed that execution for crimes that did not result in death was barbaric. It was a message from the depths of history, whispering that the swords of justice must be wielded wisely. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy, and this has been One Mic History. This is the story of the Martinsville Seven. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at OneMicHistory.com. Also, if you like to support the channel, you can do so on Buy Me Coffee, Patreon, in the description below. Peace.